Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Welcome to another episode of Modern Chiropractic Mastery. Today, I'm excited to bring back on Dr. Manuel Astruc. He has been on the show often. We usually try to do a quarterly episode, really our resident in the psychology of what we all do and different aspects of that. And today we're actually going to talk about leadership. And I've worked with him for the last 7 months now on improving leadership and really getting into the root of what leadership can be and understanding that. And one of the recent things we've done over the last couple of months is a 360 review. And we dive into that a little bit to really start to uncover ways that I can improve as a leader. We all have strengths, we all have positives, and we all have weaknesses and some blind spots. And that's what we try to uncover. And we talk a little bit about that. And I think ultimately, as a chiropractor, whether you own your business or you're an associate, or, frankly, in your personal lives, leadership can always be improved. And I think being, self-aware and being willing to continue to improve, one of the things that I know from it is that you can always get better with it. And, whether you're trying to lead your patients, because that's a big part of it. Like, as a chiropractor, who cares if you're a business owner or not? Leadership and how it really impacts your patients and their results is huge. So again, leadership's going to be, whether it's you're running a 100-person team or a 1-person team, or if it's just you're a lone wolf, or it's you and your patients, you and your family, your friends, there's a whole bunch of different aspects of what leadership is and how you can improve it. And so we dive into that today and a little bit of the process that I've been going through over the last year plus in improving that. And, and it can look different, for what it's like when you're, like in my situation, I've got a private practice that I'm currently leading, and I've got a marketing coaching company that I'm currently leading. There's a mastermind group that I lead. There's a family that I lead, and there's places where I can honestly say I'm doing great, and there's places where I know I can improve. There's been an interesting dichotomy of what it's like to have, a distributed workforce like we have at MCM, or having a more intimate kind of setting of a small practice, right? So there's a lot of different angles to it. And we dive into some, overall aspects of leadership. And Dr. Astruc's just great with that. He comes at it from a great perspective, and he's been helping me out in many ways. And it's just good to have someone as a sounding board as well when it comes to that. And so we dive into leadership. I know that we all can gain from this and improve from this. And, you don't have to be a born leader, right? I think sometimes we assume that you're born with it, but I always go back to that fixed versus growth mindset. And you want to maintain a growth mindset in many arenas, and you can improve as a leader, even if you've had issues in the past with it, or you're an introvert or whatever, right? You can get better. You may not become the, general of the U.S. Army, but that's here nor there. We just want to keep on getting better and improve and find what your leadership style is. It's going to look differently, but you will get better at it. Here is my interview with Dr. Manuel Astruc. All right, welcome to the show. I really love having you on. Our audiences loved having you on. This is the first time I'm having you on where you're actually my coach now. We were on an episode back in December, and we were talking about the poverty mindset and that type of stuff. And it was an enjoyable conversation. And I just was like, you know what? I need to take that next step in diving into the deep roots of things, whether it's the finances, but in particular, leadership. So welcome to the show again.
No, it's a pleasure, Kevin. It's just been a pleasure getting to know you over the last couple of months as I've been coaching you.
Yeah. Are you sure it's been a pleasure? Because I know it's been a lot.
Absolutely. I love coaching and absolutely, you're a great client. Great client.
Cool. One of the things that I we're going to talk about leadership today,
Mhm.
and we're going to come at it from a little bit of a different angle potentially. But I had a solo episode a few months back where, I talked about motivation, and I kind of went into different parts of where it's like, I'm looking for things that are going to really get get to the root of it, really make changes that are permanent versus some motivational stuff or some things you can learn. Is it's the way I put it is it's like a sugar high where they're just kind of covering up on top of some things that need to be sorted out. And so that's why I really made the leap of faith to work with you on it, to try to get better at leadership. And I appreciate the work we've done so far. It's been about 6 months now, so it's been really good. And part of that, and I'll segue to a topic that's fascinating to me. But part of what we've been doing is kind of building a foundation. And sometimes it's early on, it's hard. Like you're kind of diving in, you're still kind of figuring things out, and diving in and diving in. And that's ultimately what's going to have a lasting impact. But um, the first one of the things we're going to talk about today out of the gates, and we're still in the process of doing this, but doing a 360 review on me. Can you tell our audience what that is exactly, and just some of the ideas around it and the purpose of it?
So a 360 is when we get feedback from people who are around you in different capacities, um, where I get an opportunity to not just hear your side of a story, like what's going on or things like that, but now I get to hear from other stakeholders in your life who you interact with on a professional level, um, what their relationship is with you, how they're seeing your strengths, your weaknesses, what you're doing great, what you could be getting better at, where you might be struggling. But this 360 view is something that gives me a more um, a much fuller picture of what is going on. In my previous work as a psychiatrist, when I was working, I'm still a psychiatrist, but when I was
Mhm.
working inpatient psychiatry, we would get people who would come in who were very acute. They could be
Mhm.
psychotic or very depressed or intoxicated or whatever it was. And we would get one picture from the patient, and I was just bonkers at that point. For all the time, we have to get as much collateral information as we can from other people in this person's life, significant others, parents, siblings, other treating professionals, as much information as we can get around this individual. The better my ability to evaluate and prescribe a treatment is.
Mhm.
Um, I have one coach who's a mentor of mine who does 360s with everybody. And he says that his 360 is 100% for him to get to know you better.
Yeah.
Um, and that ultimately ends up helping you. Um, Marshall Goldsmith, who is the top executive coach in the country,
Mhm.
uh, he does what he calls a stakeholder 360 interview. And his mindset is that the leader is leading this team, and he wants everybody's skin in the game as to how they're doing. And the 360 review that he gets, he consolidates that into 4 or 5 points that the leader is going to be working on, and then the leader goes back and shares that with the team that gave the data, um, and then they check in every month with how am I doing on item 1, 2, 3. So let's say item 1 is you're working on anger. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I get mad and I lose it, and get frustrated and outwardly, and it's hard for people and it scares them or whatever. Um, if you were working behind closed doors with your coach and uh, you do good for 10 months in a row, and then month 11 you have a blow up, what everyone's going to say is, there he goes again. I knew it was too good to be true. Like, he's going back to his old ways. If, on the other hand, you've been checking in with the stakeholders every month, how am I doing with anger? How am I doing
Mhm.
with anger? They now have 10 months that they've giving you the feedback that you've been doing much better with your anger. So on that 11 month, that, being human, there's
Mhm.
another outburst. Um, they give you more grace with that, right? You've been doing well for 10 months. Way to go. Keep up the good work. So it's a completely different perspective that people have, based on the 360 feedback, being accountable and vulnerable with your stakeholders, with what you're working on, and then getting feedback from them on a monthly basis.
Oh, that's really good. And something that I've started to just be a little bit more introspective on is the different scenarios in my life, or the different um atmospheres in my life. It's how do I keep consistency along that? And so, for instance, you might provide really good leadership to your patients, right? I'm gonna give an example of some of our chiropractors out there may be suffering from this, where they're really good at providing leadership with their patients. They maintain calm, they have a good demeanor, they don't get angry, they don't demean or anything like that, none of the negative things. But then with their team, they do, right? It's like, why is that happening? Like that dichotomy there. Or sometimes you're really good with your team, but not your spouse. Or all these are forms of leadership. You got to lead your patients, lead your team, lead your family. And so it's just fascinating. And like in my life, there's an interesting dichotomy, and we haven't really dove into too much on that. Is like, I got kind of the coaching hat that I have when I coach a lot of chiropractors, and that's a form of leadership, whether it's the coaching or the mastermind. There's that's got a big leadership component, and then there's also being a boss, and that's something that I've kind of the dichotomy there, I would say, has been a struggle a little bit. Like there's different um, dynamics there for sure. But how does someone start to wrangle with that as like, trying to be consistent in the different arenas that you're in, or whether it's a patient, a team member, or if you're in a scenario where you do coach people, it could be coaching your kids little league or something, right? Like, how do you maintain, like, what are some of your thoughts around it? I know it's a loaded question, but it's been something I've been wrestling with.
So, I mean, I think we're all aware that we show up the different environments with different people with different personas.
Yeah.
And that's just like how it is. And in these different personas, we're going to have different levels of, you know, how we present ourselves, what we're thinking in terms of our professionalism, and at home we're going to be a lot more lax than in a professional, and it should probably be the other way around, right?
Yeah.
Like, we should be bringing our best selves to my wife and kids all the time. Um, but we do have those different areas, and if we're not intentional, it's very easy to do exactly what you're saying. I can show up as a really good leader in some places, and much less so in other places. You know who this is reminding me of? Carol Dweck,
Mhm.
who wrote the book Mindset, and she talks
Yep.
about the growth mindset so much. And she gives the example of the growth mindset, that you can have different aspects of your life where you're very good with your growth mindset. So she
Mhm.
says that academically working, with her PhD candidates and teaching and with her colleagues, she's got a great growth mindset. Like, I'm going to figure this out. It's all good. And she doesn't struggle with it at all. And she says when she comes home, dealing with her husband, like as soon as
Mhm.
there's friction and something goes off the rails a little bit, she's got a very fixed mindset. Is her natural set point. So she'll say, I'm no good at marriage. It's like terrible. I need to get out of this. We need a divorce. And he has to talk her off the ledge and remind her, no, like the growth mindset, we can get better at this.
Mhm.
So I think it's just part of the human experience, that there's areas where we're going to have an easier time, in areas where we're going to have a harder time. And that intentionality,
Mhm.
what you're bringing in, and that introspection, just kind of knowing yourself. Yep, when I'm home, I'm going to, like, get really down on myself if I can't figure something out, and might be much more likely to not be the best leader.
Yeah.
But it's very much human nature.
Yeah, and I bet you, they say the difference for me with say coaching versus being a boss is the emotional attachment that's there versus not. When you're
Mhm.
coaching someone, obviously I want them to do better, and I definitely want them to succeed and do all that stuff. But like when it's in your office and you're looking at this or that that's going wrong, and there's that emotional attachment to it. And that's something that I've at least started to recognize and trying to get to the root of that. It's like, okay, I need to be a leader, whether I'm coaching someone or if I'm in the mastermind or if I'm at home, or I need to be a leader, not a boss in a sense, in the practice to make sure that the culture is strong, right?
And I think you're hitting on something. Defining leadership. Um, it's Dave Maxwell, the writer on leadership, right? I think it's David
John, I
Maxwell.
think John, maybe
John
John.
Maxwell. Yep,
Yep.
yep. John. He says leadership is influence, nothing
Mhm.
more, nothing less. And you can see when you're less attached to the outcome, how, when you're coaching, you can coach and be a little bit more detached and, have that influence without really being emotionally invested. At the office, if someone, I don't know, didn't change the toilet paper like when
Yeah.
they used it last, all of a sudden you're much more emotionally attached, right?
Yeah.
You want that change. You're in control. You need to make it happen. It's much less about influence and much more about control.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously leadership is a big topic. All right, Docs, here is a new opportunity for you from Darcy Sullivan of Propel. She is our SEO specialist in helping out many chiropractors with their search engine optimization and making sure Google is finding you and getting you new patients. It's amazing how many new patients chiropractors can get and are getting when they do the SEO right and a few other things. And Darcy is offering a free SEO workshop just for chiropractors, and you can sign up for that at bit.ly/propelmcm. That is bit.ly propelmcm, modern chiropractic marketing, right? And so check out that link. And we're going to have you go over 5 SEO secrets to owning the first page of Google without buying ads. And Darcy's going to give that free workshop, 1 hour, to really help grow your practice and start churning new patients from the ever mighty Google, which is still king in the online marketing. So check that out at bit.ly/propelmcm for the 1 hour free workshop. I'd love to hear about some of the stuff that you've noticed from effective leaders you're an EO. Can you explain to our audience what that is a little bit, and then just what you've noticed with some of the high level leadership from organizations like that?
Yeah, so EO is Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's a organization of entrepreneurs who are making $1 million and above in revenue in their companies, and they've got a entrepreneurs organization um, junior league where if you're making between 250 and a million, you can join up and they coach you to get your revenues up to scale.
Mhm.
There's about 18,000 members nationwide, and it's an incredibly active organization. The entrepreneurs who are on this uh, are all they've all drank the Kool-Aid. They love
Mhm.
being entrepreneurs. They love being together with other entrepreneurs. There's a lot of volunteering for positions within EO. It's all non-paid. Um, and you're working with a bunch of other entrepreneurs when you're trying to lead. But one of the things that they do very well within the organization is just encourage people to step up into leadership positions.
Yep.
Um, so the culture is built around, you know, giving back, getting in, getting to know people, and not just staying on the sidelines. So I think that that's one of the things that they do very well. Um, and I haven't been in the military, but when I've talked to folks who have been in the military and the leadership that comes out of the military circles, it's sort of the same thing. People are pushed into leadership positions from early on, and in safe ways with a lot of support. But the expectation is that you put yourself out there, and you're leading from the front, leading from behind, but that you're thinking as a leader all the time. Um, Within the individuals that I know in EO, leadership styles are all over the map. Um,
Yeah.
Very charismatic people, people who are more reserved. I think that what I see as a common trait is, there's this dedication to providing value for their customers and their teams. Um, just very, very fixed on that, um, and very values driven. You know, there's we had a situation where there was a realtor in my forum within EO who uh, had another realtor like spend hours going over his people that he'd hired, and they found something with a licensing thing on an email that someone had, inadvertently presented themselves as something that they weren't, and they filed a state complaint. And he came into the forum just hopping mad. This guy had like put in a state complaint, and he'd taken all this time just to ding him, and like what a he was off his rocker. Like he was just so mad, and like, what should I do? How do I fight back? And at the end of the discussion, what he ended up deciding he was going to do is he wrote him a thank you note. Thanks for pointing this out.
Yeah.
And he sent them a a $20 coupon for coffee, like the Dunkin'
Yeah.
Donuts. Just kind of taking the higher minded, leadership
Yeah.
kind of approach, rather than kind of getting into the muck and let's fight.
Yeah. And that's that's a big thing that that over, I would say over the last year and a half is when I really started to try to focus on improving my leadership. And I'm a big believer that anybody can get better at leadership. They can become a good leader. Like you said, I think what happens is we think of the Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, like the charismatic leader. And if we're not that, we can't be a leader. But there's so many awesome leaders. And one of the books you shared with me early on with Ed Catmull, and he just an example of someone that's mild mannered. He had to work with Steve Jobs in a completely different animal, but was very, very good at leadership. And that book really resonated with me because everybody's going to lead a little bit differently. And over the last year and a half, I've been trying to get better at it. I think whenever you do really try to get better at something, you take some steps back, you take some steps forward. It's kind of like my golf game. I'm a pretty good golfer, but if I really decide to go get lessons from a teaching pro for about 3 to 6 months, I'm worse on the golf course playing golf because I'm trying to implement things that are not comfortable, but they're going to give me the long term benefit. I've done that a couple of times in my golf game, and it's really helped. And it's kind of been the same thing with leadership, where it's like you kind of pick some scabs there, and you kind of like have to reflect and say, yeah, like I'm struggling in this department, but ultimately that's how you're going to get better. And I would say that's kind of where I'm at right now. Over the last 3 to 6 months, I'm very happy with where things are going to be going, but right now it's like, okay, figuring out a few things for sure. And I think I'll give myself a little bit of credit because I think that's inherently leadership in itself, is being willing to put yourself in that situation to feel like shit sometimes and to improve and get better at it, and know that I can get there. And I want my audience to realize that as well. Like they can start to reflect where there's some struggles, and you can get better at it.
That's right. And the payoffs are just huge. Just the fact that you're being introspective and holding yourself accountable. People pick up that energy, that vibration, and it's so meaningful. The book Good to Great
Mm.
was one of my favorite, is one of my favorite books. And for the people who don't know it, Jim Collins and his crew took 16, 20, 30 companies, and they matched them up for industry and when they got started. Um, and like one of them blew up, went from good to great, and one of them didn't. And they studied the various factors that made them get better.
Yeah.
And what he told his crew is, what I don't want to hear at the end of this exercise is that what made the difference is leadership. Like, I just don't believe that that's the case. We've got to find something else besides leadership. And as they were finishing up the research, the crew came back to him and said, we're sorry, but leadership is a crucial part. It's not the only piece here, but what they called level 5 leadership made the difference in these companies. And level 5 leadership were leaders who were humble and looked for, the betterment of the company, the betterment of the customers, over their own, self, right?
Yep.
So that humility and not putting themselves first at all made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think for chiropractors, that goes again. It's like being a leader for your patients. Too many are not. They're afraid to tell them what the reality of it is and what they need to get them better and stay better, or obviously leadership in teams. And I want to kind of touch on it a little bit because I think something I've noticed again, I'm using myself as an example, kind of, be candid with folks here and stuff. I think part of what I've struggled with is, when you do have a lot of people working for you or with you in different capacities, and I've got a few companies that I have, so like there's a lot of different types of people that work with me or for me, is a couple things. It's like I've started to realize too, I've brought in some folks in different positions that it just wasn't the right person, and I didn't deal with that well. So I've noticed there's some compatibility things there that I need to recognize sooner. But I want to take it a little more globally here in a sense, is that, and I think a lot of people are struggling with this. I think leaders are struggling with this, and I think team members or employees are struggling with this. But what are you noticing is like the difference between what good leadership is today versus in the past? There definitely seems to be some headbutting going on between employer, employee, and that type of stuff. But what are you noticing the differences today's day and age?
It's a good question. It's so interesting. And where my mind goes to is sports. Um, the old age of sports, when you had the coach, the code laid down the law, and that was the law, and that's what the players had to deal with. And it was, my way or the highway. And now, as we've got, superstars and players who are, making significant amounts of money and their contributions to the team and whatnot, what the coaches are now doing who are really successful are really working with, individual players. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What motivates them? What doesn't motivate them? And it's no longer about my way or the highway, right? It's about how do I get the most from the talent around me?
Yeah.
And that willingness to shift in that direction. Now, that still has to be with boundaries, right? You can't just, you want to party till 3 a.m, and as long as you have a good game, that's fine. We'll just you have a different set of rules than everybody else. You still have to have, safe, reasonable boundaries within that. But, taking a look at the individuals around you and what makes them shine, what motivates them. And it's not just about, me as the boss, but them as what their needs are. So they can be the most productive, best employee and the best representations of my brand out there that they can have.
Yeah, it's like the Bobby Knight leadership isn't going to really work anymore. Or even you could see someone who's had a very long career where he's lucky he started out with a ton of success and it's been able to carry him for a bit, as Bill Belichick, where,
Yeah.
there's because a lot of his coaching tree, the people that have coached underneath him and left, try to do it the Bill Belichick way, and it just doesn't work because obviously, like Bill Belichick has all these Super Bowl rings, so people will deal with it and say, "Oh, well, the guy's a winner; he's proven it." but he's lucky he won those early on. Like, you can't just come out of the gates like that anymore. It just hasn't worked out in a lot of ways. And then I'll use a great coach who I really admire. Fortunately, they just lost the NBA Finals last night, but Eric Spoelstra of the Miami Heat, like, to me, he's like that modern leader. Like, no one questions how good of a leader that guy is, but you're not going to hear the rah rah. You're not going to see the massive yelling. He's a player's coach in that sense, and that's a I love using sports analogy. I'm glad you did, because I think people can really relate to that a little bit.
No, yeah. So there was an Eric Spoelstra story that came out on a podcast. I don't know if I sent it to you, but I will if you didn't get it. But it very much the players coach, like, what makes them shine, and what do they need from me to be the best players that they can be, and input from the players, right? There's a dialogue, there's communication, it's going back and forth, very much so.
And that's what I'm trying to struggle with. And I've talked to a lot of other of my colleagues that are of my age group, that kind of Gen X group. And I don't want to generalize generations and such, but we're trying to figure out, like, where's the meat in the middle? Like, do I just throw my hands up and say, okay, just got to do whatever I got to do with the younger generation to make them happy? Or, but I can't also go, General Patton on them anymore. That's not going to work. And so it's like trying to find that middle ground. And I think you put it good, is like, okay, you got to be that player's coach in a sense, or that team leader, but you have to have boundaries as well. And I think that's important, to not let those get fuzzy, and obviously communicate that well. Is that what you're saying, is kind of find that middle ground?
No, exactly. And that communication, I think, is key.
Yep.
And I think that's something that in the past probably wasn't quite so important. When you got the employee, there was a hierarchy that was kind of understood. There was a hierarchy of, I'm the boss, you're not, and this
Yeah.
is how it goes. And I think that some of the younger people that are coming into work, they've got different priorities, and they want to have a voice, and they want to understand. And it's not necessarily that they want to be in charge or in control, but it's no longer good enough to just say, I want you to stand here and stamp out these widgets. Like,
Yep.
it's like, well, why, and what's my growth capacity here, and what happens after I learn to do widgets real well? I mean, they want more, and it's not unreasonable.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And it was interesting. I interviewed Joey Coleman again. This time he's got a book out called Never Lose an Employee Again. And it's kind of a take on his Never Lose a Customer Again framework. And it was a really good interview. I really enjoyed it, and I got a lot out of it. And just one of it is like, we're not going back to pre 2020. Like, this is what it is. It's going to be like this. We've got to find a middle ground there, and we have to appreciate a lot of the positives of, say, the younger generation, because there are a lot of positives. We have to try to understand some of the things that are different than what our generation kind of grew up with and expected. And so we can't just denounce it and say, I want it to be like it was, or try to find the one out of 50 that is old school mentality, right?
Yeah.
And so I got a lot out of that, and realized it was just kind of eye opener for me, is like, okay, like, if I'm really going to take this leadership thing seriously, I'm going to have to um, figure out what that looks like for multiple types of different generations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the growth mindset. We've got to get better at this, right?
Yeah.
It's never a finished product, being a leader.
Yeah. And then, like, I'm trying to figure out the difference between leadership, like in my practice when everybody's in here physically, and then in my MCM company, everybody's distributed. And basically, what does it look like to provide leadership through Slack and Zoom calls? And so that's a whole other different animal that I'm working through.
Yeah. So one of the wonderful things about the world as it is today is that we've got lots of models out there,
Yeah.
and a lot of these people with different uh, jobs and ways that they do it. Uh, they talk about it. They have podcasts like you're doing now. So you're able to peek in and see what other top performers out there, how they're leading, what they're doing, what's working for them. Um, we're no longer in this closed system where, it's just up to me to figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's for sure. And I think that makes a good segue. That's probably one of the first few key steps in improving one's leadership. Because again, going back, like I know you are, and I'm a big believer, is like you can get much better at leadership. You can become a very effective level 5 leader. And that's what you just said is a good first step. But what are some other steps you would recommend people take that like, okay, you know what, I'm ready to really start working on this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's always a process. Like I said, it's been a year and a half for me. Obviously, there was things I was doing in the past to get better at it, but this is going to be a lifelong thing. But what are some of the things that someone can do out of the gates to start improving this?
For me, it's mindset. And uh, my very first day of med school, uh, we had 400 people in a big stadium seating classroom, and we have various deans walking through and talking about your first day of med school and what's going to happen, and so on and so forth. And the dean of students came and he said something. It was Dr. Hugo Seibel, and he said, you're going to be talking to people, and they're going to tell you about things that they haven't told anybody. You're going to be putting your fingers in places that nobody is allowed to put fingers in. You're going to
Yeah.
be doing things with people. Um, and what you can never, ever forget is that it's an honor to be doing what you're doing, right? So that mindset of level 5 leadership, it's an honor to be doing what we're doing for our patients, for our staff, with our family. Trying to keep that top of mind is so important. Our accountability and our ability to uh, be introspective and to get help when we need that. Um,
Yeah.
that willingness to get feedback, and feedback sometimes stings, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it takes to get us to the next level. It's the, you know, like Dan Sullivan would say, all progress starts by telling the truth. Um, and knowing where you are, where you want to get to, and giving yourself that long runway to get where you want to be.
Yeah. And I think if you communicate through that, then you get a longer runway, right? And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and do that. What would your recommendations be if someone has a falling out with a team member or a patient or a family member? Like you had a good example with that gift card and the thank you note from the realtor, which is a great way of doing that. Um, but what would you recommend as from a leadership standpoint, how to start the process to overcome maybe an issue like you blew your top and you had the anger fit, or you just someone or your team member, like something happened there. What would you recommend?
I mean, the situations can be so varied, but we start off by being introspective. Like, how did I contribute to the problems that occurred?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that, Kevin, you're really good at that. Um, right. So you start off from, where did I mess up? How do I make things better? Um, and we also want to have a little bit of a sense of what's going on with the other person. And there's got to be a candid conversation at some point,
Mhm.
ideally sooner rather than later, when you've had a chance to cool off and to kind of understand better, like what
Mhm.
happened from your perspective, um, with a sense of the outcome that you want from this next communication. Let's mend fences. Let's make sure that we're both on the same side, because usually we are, right? It's,
Mhm.
we want the best for you. We want the best for the company. We want the best for the customers, in the family. We want the best for our spouse. We want the best for our kids. Um, and really kind of doubling down that this is where we're coming from, and that whatever differences are occurring, we're still operating from the same side.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think kind of ties back to what we said earlier, and the charismatic leader, there's going to be some of those. That's great. A lot of times that's a lot of window dressing, it seems like. But I think now in this modern world, we're looking at that empathetic leader, and I think that's what we've got to work towards. And I'm trying to get there. slowly but surely. And so, and your help's been instrumental in that. And I think we just have to start to take leadership seriously and do the things that are going to help with that. Be honest with yourself and don't beat yourself up too much either, right?
We're never finished products. That's right. That's just how it is.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just the same thing. Like I read a lot of history and I read a lot of military history, and you'll hear about the star general, and they're typically like in their late 50s and their 60s by time that came to fruition, right? And what were they doing all those years before? They were working themselves up leadership and getting better at it. And some of them, like obviously Winston Churchill's one, he was disgraced after World War One and complete fail. I think it was Gallipoli, like just completely all like most careers would have been completely done after that, right? And then here he comes. Like, I don't know how old he was during World War II, but he wasn't spring chicken, right? And now we think of him as someone as like one of the ultimate leaders in our modern history, right? And so it didn't happen overnight for him. Luckily, most of us listening to this podcast aren't going to have to, be a leader in a massive war like that. But it just kind of shows on a obviously an extreme end, like it does take time, and you don't know when this is going to serve you best, but the sooner you work on it, the sooner you're going to get there.
And don't do it alone, right? So you can, have a virtual set of mentors that you're listening to on podcasts or reading, get a group together, get coaching. But you don't have to be alone with this either. It's so important to have other people that you can bounce things off of and see that no one else has their act together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And that's why we're having you come be our presenter at our mastermind one of the weekends in 2024, because it's a group of 25 chiropractors that really are doing big things and have great practices. But as they all can attest, no one's got their shit together in there. So you're going to help us get our shit together. But hey, Doc, this was great. I really appreciate your insights. I love having you on every, 3 to 6 months on different topics, and it's always enjoyable. And so thank you again for your time. How can our audience find out more about what you're doing?
So manuelastruc.com is my website. There's a sign up there for a weekly newsletter, and I do a morning musings on Facebook Live that you can sign up for there as well.
Yeah, and I want to plug your book again too. Happiness Rules was really good. I sent this to a few of our coaching clients, and it really resonated with them well. So they can check that out probably wherever they can buy books, right?
It's everywhere. Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books,
Yep.
Barnes and Nobles, everywhere.
And I think it's so important for chiropractors because like the essence of it is like really how do we be a better entrepreneur, but how do we prevent burnout and that type of stuff that we're all dealing with, and a lot of great insights for that. So, and it's a good read. So highly recommend it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you want to make the shift from busy, broke, and broken to time-free and cash confident, or you just want to continue with the exponential growth, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. Look at the MCM Mastery tab, watch the short video on there, and check out what we are doing now for evidence-informed chiropractors. We are equal parts coaching and marketing done for you. Yes, you shoot some videos, we help you with campaign strategies and ideas and really become a thought leader in your community. You shoot those videos, you send them to us, we produce, edit, and brand them to you. Then we distribute them through all of your channels. We also take them and we turn it into one good blog per month. And every other month, we have Darcy Sullivan producing a robust blog with a topic that you pick from her database to help with your SEO. So we essentially become your content marketing agency to make sure your practice is always having ethical, elegant content marketing to help grow your practice. On the coaching side, we also help you with everything from marketing ideas to business, communications, finances, anything practice growth, and really try to help prevent you from being stuck on that island. And we hold you accountable. We have a great group of doctors that are just doing amazing things, and we look forward to help you out to take that next step in your practice. So again, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and learn more.